All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the RK Leadership Podcast, where we empower tomorrow's leaders through sharing of knowledge, experience, and inspiring stories. I'm your host, Rob Cameronport, and my special guest today is Natalie Nadeau. And Natalie is a marketing and personal branding consultant. I will let Natalie introduce herself a little further more, and then we'll get right into the questions. But before she does that, I wanted to take this moment to thank you for joining me this morning. And again, I appreciate your time in doing a podcast with me. So without further ado.
Thanks so much, Rob. And I'm so grateful to be here. And, I love what you're doing. And, it's a pleasure to be a part of it. So like Rob said, marketing, business, personal branding consultant. I'm a former chief marketing officer, and I basically kind of have a plug and play system that I drop into companies to kind of scale them to 6 or 7 figures monthly.
Nice. That's amazing. So Natalie, can you walk us through your journey of becoming a leader, and what challenges did you face, moving up, and what did you learn from those challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was probably my first year out of college, immediately got into leadership, where I think it was more of like a power trip and being in control. And, you're super young, so you have no idea what you're actually doing or what it means to actually be a good leader. And you don't have a lot of experience with having good leaderships to kind of look up to because you're just starting out. So I did get jumped and kind of pushed into that pool pretty quickly. I was about, 20. So from there, my teams just kind of kept expanding as well as my roles. And then I would probably say as I became a chief marketing officer by the age of 28, that's when my real leadership skills had to kind of really kick in and everything really changed for me. But I would probably bounce back a couple years where I was just the head of the marketing department, and, we were a smaller company. And I would probably say the number one thing that kind of brought me to struggling with realizing that I was not a good leader was the fact that I would try to wear as many hats as possible. And I thought that it made me more valuable. And it actually just made me unaware. And it ended up causing me to be the thing that was holding the company back. And nobody ever said anything. They let me kind of go through my own journey and my own process through that experience. But it was really just being able to understand and start becoming aware that I couldn't do it alone. And I needed, other power key players around me in order to really bring a business from where it was to where we wanted it to go. And being able to do that 10 times faster, right? Because if you're just one person trying to build something, it's going to take you forever. But if you can have an army of people who are exceptional just like you're going to get there way, way faster. So I would say that was kind of the big thing that shifted everything. And then when I started taking being a leader even more seriously and starting to learn about different personalities, meeting people where they're at, helping them kind of grow and become the best versions of themselves. I had to do a lot of internal work and work on myself before I could really guide and lead people the way that they deserved and needed to be. So I would probably say those are kind of my key pillar moments as a leader.
Awesome. I love how you said, you had to work on yourself.
Yeah.
First. Can you kind of talk to us about or walk us through what kind of things did you do to work on yourself? And again, what was the pivotal moment during those times for you?
Yeah, I think, realizing that you can't do it alone is one thing, but then also realizing that, your ego can't be involved here, right? And so I think we all kind of go through a phase where, you bring on these other key players, but you want to remain the smartest person in the room, right? And like, you almost think like if somebody comes on your team and what if they're smarter than me? What if then I lose my job and they give it to this person? Or some kind of things like that. So I realized like, hey, you know what, Natalie, your ego is front and center here. We need to fix this and figure out what is the root cause that is actually making you feel that way, right? So it's not enough to just identify what the problem is that you're facing. You actually have to go and do the hard thing and ask yourself why that is happening. So I did a little soul searching and diving and, thinking back on my childhood and what could have like played into making me kind of operate and have that kind of a limiting mindset, or what made me feel like I was such an underdog, right? And so I kind of just went through those emotional barriers and really just did the internal work to kind of remove those obstacles for myself, which then allowed me to kind of open up and really start to value other people and really appreciate them for who they are and what they brought to the table. And that's when I was able to start like focusing on top talent acquisition and reframing how I would even post a job posting to attract the right people into the company so that I could grow exponentially. And like, I think, just that was probably the biggest internal work, but removing the ego and just, shifting and keep on going.
No, that's great. A lot of the coaching clients that I have, that's one of the things we get into is the root cause, as you pointed out, and that's fantastic because everything starts at the root cause, and if you don't get to that, you're just putting a Band-Aid solution on it. So when you talk about root cause and the childhood traumas or experiences that we all go through,
right?
How do you go on to actually fix that, and how can you do it by yourself?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question and something that a lot of people struggle with, because your comfort zone is a much more like satisfying place to be, right? And I think it's much easier to try and pour from like a cracked cup that's leaking and trying to just do really busy work, right? That's going to just like kind of ignore it. And if I just don't look at it, then it'll go away. So those are the easier things to do. But something about me has just always been like, how can I be better than I was the day before? Nice. And I started asking myself this question from a very young age because I've just always been very business kind of entrepreneurial, like that 8-year-old kid who's like, I'm going to be a CEO one day. So I had a very strong, compelling future that I was looking towards and that I wanted for myself. And I had big dreams, big heart, big soul, and just wanted to kind of fill that up. So I think if you have a strong enough why behind the reason why you're gonna want to improve, it makes doing the internal work and kind of figuring out and being able to even ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? I think you have to have a compelling future and a compelling something that makes you excited to wake up in the morning for you to want to fix the problems that are in your life in order to actually go and do the hard stuff. So for me, I had a strong why. I have an even stronger one today, but it just, kind of allowed me to become consciously aware of where I'm at. And I think it's just about being humble with yourself and knowing that two things can be true at the same time. You can be a work in progress and a success. Those two things can coexist. And if you can give yourself permission to not be perfect, then you can kind of have the permission that you need to do that internal work and kind of dive deeper. So how do you identify what your own kind of obstacles are and really dive into them and do that by yourself? Is probably saying, like, if you were to put your resume out there and really evaluate everything that you've done up to this point, how would you look at yourself as a candidate? And what would you say about yourself? And where do you think that this person, if you just looked at them, everything written on paper, and you looked at it without looking at you, but just in general, then you can kind of identify where those pitfalls are. And I think internally, we all know the thing that we should stop doing, or I should do this, right? So I think it's just setting a new standard and like just knowing that everything you want is on the other side of the work you're too lazy to do or too scared to do or just not ready to, right? So it's a matter of how much longer do you want to stay stuck where you are versus how much are you willing to fight for what you actually want out of life, right?
That's right. No, that's great. So you mentioned the why, your why, and the purpose is important. So what's your why?
Okay, well, it took me a long time, and it's a big question to ask yourself why you're here and what you want to do. And for a really long time, I was like, well, I have all these different passions, and which one is it, and what am I supposed to do? And I launched a company, I think my first company, when I was like 23. And I went into it and I was like, wow, I am not as smart as I thought I was. This is not what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. And so I pivoted my why, because first it was just, I'm a marketer, I'm a business person, I can run e-commerce, I can do online companies. So that's what I dove into. Then it became a matter of, with the second company I launched a few years after that, it was, well, I'm tired of making millions for other people. I'm going to go and make my own millions. And I was able to flip this company from like $5 a day in ads to over $6,000 a month in just a few short months. And I realized, and I felt awful. It was an online clothing line for women. And I was like, I'm prying on people's insecurities here. I am not making a positive impact in the world. Nothing that I'm doing is really like making me feel fulfilled, or like, and I was like, maybe I could start a podcast and, help these people with their mindset, or, and I've always been into self-development. And then I was like, yeah, but I'm still selling these clothes and it makes me feel shady, right? And I was in it for all the wrong reasons. So that was probably about 5 years ago. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do the work, and I'm going to figure out what it is and why I'm here. What am I really passionate about? And until I really, really know that answer, I will never launch another company. So It took me, a long time to work through internal things and removing, different behavioral patterns and thought patterns inside of my life to really uncover that question. So for me now, I basically, my why, my mission, my purpose is being able to use the gift that I have to understand the bird's eye view and all the moving parts of a digital business, because I've only run and operated digital businesses for the last 12 years. So I have a gift, and no matter what kind of company that it is, I just have this ability to understand all of it and where it needs to go. So I knew that if I could be in the business of helping people who are in the business of helping other people, and I could give them all the tools and the resources that they needed to scale that long term and make the greatest, authentic, most impactful kind of company that they could. If I could help 100 companies who then go and serve and help another 100 companies, and then they go and help another 100 people, that is a very good positive ripple effect inside of the world. And that is a reason to kind of wake up in the morning.
Nice. Excellent, Natalie. No, that's very well put and very well articulated. And
I put some thought into it.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, a lot of the leaders you talk to, their whys are always around helping others and feeling that sense of fulfillment. So until you get to that point, that kind of, it's almost like the self-actualization to figure out who you are, why you're here, and what you want to do for this world.
Right.
That's your breaking point, and that's a great place to be in my opinion, at least. We talk about, even getting into a leadership role or becoming a leader. One of the things you do have to deal with internally is the fear that you talked about. And there's a lot of people that get held back because of, the self-doubt, the fear, their self-limiting beliefs, whatever it is. How do you deal with that? internally, how do you deal with that and to kind of overcome those fears to become that leader that you want to be?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, I talk to people every single day who are just living in their fear instead of actually being present in reality. And so I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, if you can decide, and this is just something that's kind of worked for me, but I think when you're inside of your head, you're in your emotions, you're in your feelings, you're stuck in the past, right? Because there's something that is causing that to be kind of something that's impacting you. And it could be something that you're consciously unaware of from your childhood, or, you feel like there's a reason and a root cause why you feel that fear and why you're not enough or you can't do it, or there's some kind of internal driver that is rooted. Maybe somebody told you would never make it. Maybe you had really unsupportive parents. Maybe you had, a lot of trauma growing up, or there was some kind of addiction, or, some unhealthy relationships that were in your past that have caused you to then no longer just be present with people and accept them for who they are and where they're at on that journey. So I always say the moment that you're in your fear, your anxiety, you're stuck and you're living in the past, right? And then the same can be true when you are focusing on the outcome, right? Like, if I hire this person, will I get that $1 million in return on that? Will I, actually be able to grow and scale the company? Will I get my time back? Will this happen? So the same can be true, and you're focused on the outcome of a situation rather than just the tasks involved with it. You are then focusing on the future. So I always say that you're either here now or you're nowhere, right?
Mhm.
Because you're either lost thinking about the future or you're lost thinking about your past. So if you can really just be present in the moment. And I think that's why processes and systems are so good, right? Because you can break everything down and you have this big goal of, I want to make $1 million annually, or whatever that is for you. And all you have to do, instead of focusing on how that makes you feel, or what if kind of this happens or this happens or this happens, if you can just come back to the present moment and focus on the things that are actually required of you to do on a daily basis to achieve your desired outcome, or to become a good leader, or to, have any kind of result that you're looking to achieve by bringing those people on and your desire to lead. If you remove the fear and just focus on what makes me a good leader, what qualities can I have to really drive this team home? How can I be better at steering that ship and driving this car and helping everybody else who's inside of it, right? So it's about being present and not stuck inside of your mind. And so, like I said, the number one thing that is always, and I do this as soon as, because we are human and our brains are designed to show us the worst case scenario, or what our thoughts and what we used to think about it, but they're also required to show you the best case scenario. Now, what you choose to focus on that spectrum is where you're going to land. So you can just live in the present, or you can just, thanks for letting me know. I've seen both sides. This is what's important.
That's right. No,
Yeah.
that's great. And I wanna talk about, you said when you want to become a millionaire, don't focus on how it makes you feel.
No.
Now, with respect to that, there's a lot of people out there that say, you should feel, you should kind of try to feel what it would feel like to be a millionaire,
Yeah.
and that would drive you and kind of motivate you to there. So are you saying the opposite? I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I've heard that as well, and I think it's a matter of if you have $1 million right
Mhm.
now here today, if you won the $50 million on the lottery today, if you're unhappy, you're still unhappy. So I don't know that it really matters. And I think when so I don't know if you know who Ed Milet is, but I
Yeah.
listen to him all the time. And he said something that just kind of stuck with me. And he's like, you don't really want $1 million. You want the feeling that $1 million is going to give you, which
Yes.
is freedom. And if you think about what is happiness really, and kind of having it all, right? I think it's having the ability and the freedom to choose. But you actually have that freedom to choose now, right? So I think it just automatically isn't necessarily about chasing a feeling or trying to force something that isn't real, but just eliminating the future and the what ifs and how will I feel with that $1,000,000, or wow, that's a really, like, that's scary. What am I going to do? What if I lose it all? Right. So I think it's just always coming back to the present moment and just focusing on what is happening and not being too busy to really like be present in that. So I don't disagree with it. I think people are just kind of like chasing it in the wrong way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's brilliant. And I love what you're saying. It really makes sense. And for me, what resonates with me is living in the presence. So you
Yes.
talk about living in the presence, which I think a lot of people don't live in the presence. They're either stuck in their past, or they get caught up in this fear in the future, and they don't know where they are really. So
Yeah.
when you talk about being in the present, how do you practice being in the present?
Yeah. I mean, I literally tell myself as soon as I feel myself, maybe, I recently launched my own podcast. So I'm going to dive in on that as an example. But um, I had a lot of fear, anxiety, stress, worry, all those things that go through your head. And, same for leadership. Am I going to be a good leader? Can I drive the ship? Can I do all of these things? And I just, literally say to myself, be here now, be here now, and be here now. And so just having that thought and speaking it out, and then I won't stop saying it until I can come back into that reality and just eliminate those other thoughts. So it's being consciously aware of what you're thinking and what you're allowing into your life, and what kind of standard that you have for yourself and your day. So in any moment, the moment you start to worry about the outcome, the moment you start to think about your emotions, it's just continuously making the habit of be here now and just not stopping until you are.
Amazing. That's well said, Natalie. I love that. And I'm gonna, use that as well. Be here now. And I think a lot of people do need to practice, being in the present. So again, well said on that. Now, I want to kind of shift towards. I've got a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about.
Sorry.
One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is, you talked about scaling companies, and I believe one of the companies you scaled to 10 million,
Yeah.
or helped scale to 10 million. What did you learn from that experience that you can share with the younger people on this journey?
Sure. I think that it doesn't happen overnight. It's never going to happen as fast as you want it to. And honestly, it's about having the right people a part of that journey, because
Mhm.
you have to be able to identify our, we're driving in this car and somebody's halfway out the window and, they're kind of creating a lag on it, and you're not able to continue driving as fast as you would like to. And certain times people are like throwing stuff out of the window and it causes you to speed bump, and there's, different things that are happening along that journey. And so I think you really have to become consciously aware of, are the people on my team the right people involved? And are they are the people who got me here the people who are going to help me get to where I want to go? And I think that's a really big thing. And a lot of times, people will hold themselves back in the wrong relationships, or that could be something that as a good leader, you're being held back at home, which is affecting your leadership in the workplace and putting blinders on you to, is the right team there? Now, every time you scale, I think having standard operating procedures and streamlining your company in a way that you could plug anybody into any department at any given time, and the world will not fall apart, and like
Yeah.
nobody is indispensable. So I think it's really a matter of having a long-term mindset and being able to understand that instant gratification, short-term wins, all of those stuff are not going to serve you at all on that scaling and growing journey. And it's being able to manage your finances appropriately as well, so that you can actually afford to scale and keep up with it. And also being able to control it. So, for example, I think being able to have, again, I love the bird's eye view of a business, because when you can see all the moving parts and understand where it's all kind of operating and functioning, you know exactly when you need to put the brakes on and kind of reevaluate so that things can catch up before they fall flat, right? So it's being consciously aware and just accepting the situation for what it is, instead of like trying to hide it or prevent it, or how can I put duct tape on this so it doesn't break. It's just like, let's fix this like leak inside of this and make sure we're still going forward. And I would say the other thing is knowing who you're going to have to hire next, right? So you can't hit a target that you don't set. And if you're just kind of aimlessly doing stuff and you don't actually know where you're supposed to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and so forth, that can be a really big problem. And, I think as a leader, you usually start out your company with 1 or 2 people, right? And so knowing your shortfalls, where you fall short, where you, like, there's stuff you might even be really good at, but it shouldn't really be something that you're doing anymore. So being able to kind of like hand off those things as they're needed as well. And just being able to delegate in an efficient way, and knowing like, okay, this is another skill I have to get off of my shoulders. So that's going to be the next hire, or this should be the first hire. And okay, our shipping is growing massively. We need to maybe think about getting another warehouse. Can we cut our costs by, outsourcing this, or do we have an internal team for it? So I think the question is my answers are very generalized. If I had a very specific company with a very specific example, I could kind of break it down step by step for you. But yeah, I think those are the key pillars, and just keeping your ego out of it ultimately.
That's right. No, that's amazing. Your analogy and your explanation kind of reminded me of Patrick Bet-David's book, The Next 5 Moves.
Okay.
You always have to plan, your next 5 moves. And that's exactly what you're kind of referring to, is knowing who you have to bring on and where your gaps are. You know where your weaknesses are, and you can't do everything yourself, obviously.
And the thing too is, like, to get from 1 million or from $1 to a million, or to 10 million or to 5 million, there's obviously going to have to be product development or service development. You're going to have to tweak what you're offering, because you can't be a one product or one service kind of business, right? That doesn't scale long term. Eventually you hit a wall where it's just like, you're either time constrained, your resources are constrained, people don't want just that one thing. They're now swapping to another company that provides them with a fuller spectrum so they could save on shipping, or, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of different factors, but that goes to, those next 5 steps. You have to diversify what you're doing and being able to scale it up long term, right?
I love it. No, that's fantastic. So now, you mentioned this a few times already, like having the right people, on board. Can you talk to me about what is that? What do you mean? What is the right people? How do you hire the right people? What does the right people look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably one of the most important questions.
Yes.
And, for me, being with a marketing hat, I looked at it like anybody here who's been in sales, knows sales, anything like that. I think employers often treat hiring processes like the last thing that they have to do on Friday. It's like the least important thing, right, on their mind. And I believe in talent acquisition and filling up my top talent acquisition pipeline the same way that I would fill up my lead pipeline and promote with sales. Because why would you leave a customer to wait until Friday afternoon when they're not in the mood to talk to you? They're not in the mood to buy. They're checked out. They're whatever. And you would just never do that, right? So why would you treat your talent any other way? Why would you leave them sitting in your mailbox for 5 days when they
Yes.
could be the thing that takes you from 1 million to 5 million, right? So I think it's really being able to, like, number one, stop valuing your time more than these people in the hiring process. And you might not lose out on those top candidates because you might reach out and they don't reply to you because they've been hired already. So I think that's probably the number one bottleneck that I see across most leaders and people who are hiring. Attracting the right person, I think, goes into how much time and energy are you putting into your advertisement for this position. I don't care if it's just an Indeed post or a LinkedIn job posting. Are you using ChatGPT to write out some standardized thing? Do you actually know what the role entails? Are you naming that role what somebody, like, you might call it a sales manager, but what do they identify as, right?
Mhm.
So those might be two different things. So putting time into the research and the development of that actual acquisition strategy and putting the right things on paper. And I often find when I put seeking somebody with an entrepreneurial mindset, I get the best responses from those specific ads, but it's being able to really communicate it. And your job posting should be, you should have your copywriter probably doing it and trying to build that emotional connection with the right person. Because when you're trying to put leads into your pipeline, you're attracting the right customers. You want people who have enough money to spend or whatever, X, Y, and Z. You have those standards, right, of what qualifies them as a actual potential customer. So what qualifies them? What do you want? And what are you seeking in that person? And how can you make the job isn't for them to sell you on them. The job is for you to sell your company on them and make them so excited. And this is a place I want to be a part of. This culture is something I want to be a part of, right? I don't know the last time I looked at a job posting and saw somebody talk about, like, this is who we are. Here's our core values. Here's our mission. Like, those are things that you need to be putting inside of that. And really, like, the right person who's going to read that is going to go the extra mile. They're going to reach out to you one-on-one. And this actually happens when you put that time and energy into it. And they're going to tell you why they're the right person for this job, why you have to book them for an interview. And they do the work for you. Just like if you do your marketing correctly, clients are coming to you. You don't have to go to them, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So that's how you attract the right people. And it's just setting the right tone and understanding what your core values are, what your mission is, and really being able to understand what that job actually looks like and being factual. Now, what often can happen as well, and if you're a really good leader, somebody might be interviewing for a Facebook ads manager role, but they're actually exceptional at just running TikTok, right? So you have to really kind of, as a leader, look at that person and say, like, you are the right fit, you're the right personality, but this isn't the right job, right?
Yes.
And then ask them, like, I think you're in the wrong seat on this bus. Can we move you over here? And attracting that people. And then maybe you weren't anticipating on hiring 2 people, but both of them are willing to work part-time for you and grow into a full-time position. So you can split your budget and kind of have the right people in the right places. But it's knowing what that person's strengths are, because attracting the right people is one thing, but are they coming for the right position is another, right?
Yes.
So it's just being able to really identify that and kind of put them where they're going to grow and excel, and making sure that they have a passion and a drive behind that. And it's something that they want to grow into. And being able to say, like, I can give you all of that if you're willing to take some steps with me, and just laying that out and showing them as an employer that you have a vision for them. This is what we can do. Here's your opportunity within the company. Now go work your butt off and get there, right? So
right.
It's kind of two sides of it for me.
Yeah, no, and we all know what happens to stars that come in and they're in the wrong seat. They just get bored and they're no longer going to be with you. And I find that a lot of organizations and managers don't really put out the right job description, or when they put out a job description, it doesn't even match what the person is going to be doing, once they get hired. And it becomes frustrating for employees because you're putting out some generic piece of paper, and the reason you're doing that is because you're not putting in the time and the effort to create something properly,
Right.
because you have no time. And that's where you need to hire the right people, that talent acquisition. So I really think you should be like, you would do well in like a startup consulting job. So that's something you might want to consider.
I do business consulting
There
and
you go.
try to implement, here's the right systems, let's get those in place, and then let's get the right people, and I'll actually help train them in those positions as well.
Nice.
And I can help them get to a point where we're either kind of rinsing and repeating with new product or service development, or we get them ready to like position themselves for sale, right? And get an attractive kind of acquisition into there. So part of my umbrella goes into there.
No, I can definitely see the strength in what you're saying. So kudos to you for that. You do
Thank
a
you
great
so much.
job. Now, you and I talked about this before, and part of this hiring, fiasco
Right.
is the HR and some organizations playing these silly games where they put these rules, and we kind of linked it back to the dating world as well,
Yeah.
where you have to wait a few days to reply back, and etc. What are your thoughts around that? Because that really, it personally annoys me, and I don't like those rules at all.
Yeah. So I call this like the ego hiring, the ego present hiring manager.
Yes.
So basically what this looks like is having a job posting where, and anyone who's ever applied for a job, exactly which ones I'm talking about right now. The ones that make you jump through 20 hoops, answer 50 million questions. And, instead of just having the actual Indeed or LinkedIn website have your posting, you have to go to their website and fill everything out from your resume and jump through all these hoops. And, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, are you that concerned? Have you hired really bad people? Is that a company you want to work for? Like, the moment I see something like that, it's like, there's a problem here. There's a high turnover rate, right? There's definitely an acquisition, no acquisition kind of thought process put into there. There's no real drive or motivation. And usually what ends up happening personality wise is the person who's actually hiring for that role is probably a micromanager. They're a task manager. They want to know every little thing that you did that day, and that they're getting the most bang for their buck for every hour that you're present.
Yes.
And it's a very negative culture. Now, are some people just like trying to filter through some noise? Maybe. But at the end of the day, the companies that are doing this that I've looked at and seen tend to have some kind of retention problem. There's some kind of top leadership issue that's not being addressed. And there's a reason why they can't keep people. There's a reason why they're asking all those questions. And it's definitely goes back to like when you're dating somebody and you have to make them wait 3 days to reach you. And they try and make you jump through more hoops to prove that you're worthy enough to work for them, or that you want it bad enough. And I think that's just like red flags for a company you don't want to work for, because somebody is going to make you work that hard or make this for me. Like, I've hired graphic designers and stuff like that as well. And some of them, it's like, oh, wow, like this hiring process is so much better. I've had to make like entire projects for people or do a whole website for somebody, or, and it's just like, are you trying to get free work? Is that why you're hiring for that position? Like, what is the sole purpose? Are you even looking for somebody? So I don't know. When you have to jump through so many hoops, you really have to ask yourself, like, what's going on here? That they're not just willing to look at my resume and figure that out, right?
That's right. Yeah, and it's really bad, because I've seen some like big companies that they take 5 months, up to 5 months to hire somebody.
Right.
And to me, like, if that person is good on the other side, they've got other offers from other companies, and there's other companies that are going to pick them up quickly. So you do tend to lose out on some good talent by doing that.
Yeah, you do. And I think the people who are smart enough know, like, I don't have time for this, and they move on too, right? So they don't even end up applying anymore. But yeah, you would definitely have, when you make the hiring process too long, you again, or you're not prioritizing it enough, you have too big of hoops. It's a top leadership problem, and
Yes.
they need to pre-approve everybody because they don't trust the people around them to make the right decisions, right?
Trust. Yes.
So yeah, again, when I see those kind of problems, I just know that if this is what it takes to become a part of it, if this is kind of the red flags before you're into the company, then you're just going to have to keep jumping through multiple hoops and multiple things. Now, I think there's other exceptional companies who will do things like even have simulations where they do back and forth play, role play. They give you a little kind of mini scenario where they'll say, okay, go and take 30 minutes, read this out, and then hop back on this call with us. We'll just all kind of mute and go off of our videos for a bit. And then we're going to role play and ask you some questions or do anything like that. And I think that is exceptional because it takes, number one, you're doing it on the fly, so they don't have too much time to think about it. So you really get to assess their skill set. Number two, with that, you get to really kind of identify how they're going to act in a position. You can use examples that came up in the last quarter, right? So that you can really kind of get an idea of what this type of person is, what their real personality is. And you get to identify where their ego's at very quickly with this, because some of them will think like, yeah, I should punish this person and write them up, or if they did something wrong, or they're going to go and how they communicate with the person that they have to have that hard conversation with. It's a very eye-opening experience. So I think those hiring processes are a little bit longer, but it's probably about a 3-week thing, because you have your initial hiring step. These are usually larger enterprise companies with 500 plus employees, but they'll do your first initial hire with like, are you who you say you are? Can you do the things that you say you can do? Okay, cool. We'll move you to the next step. And then you end up meeting with a higher level who gets to ask the questions. And then you meet for your third interview, which is a simulation process. So that's kind of the tipping point where you have your regional directors or managing kind of whatever in those titles. But that's when you're able to really get the other hiring part in there. And then you get to know right away whether you're ever going to see that person again or not.
That's right.
Those are hoops that I think are putting the right systems and processes in place. And it's short enough where like somebody has to give a 2 weeks notice anyways. So if they figure that out, then they can kind of do that and drop off, and it's not too lengthy.
That's right. So another thing with respect to that, Natalie, is again, something that's inefficient from my perspective, when you don't set the expectations, the role, and even the salary range at the beginning. Now you're going through all these phases and you get to the final stage and you come to realize that you're so far apart from a salary expectation aspect that everything just went to waste.
Yeah.
Right.
I think you have to put your salary and like a clear grounded, like we're only hiring this position for $92,000 a year. That's our cap. If your skill set doesn't match that, our starting range is $70K.
Yes.
And I think when you initially meet somebody, it's always, so I know you've seen the salary range when you applied for this position. Where do you fall on that spectrum? And what do you think that you're valued at? Right. And letting them kind of voice their opinion. And whenever you ask that question, it's always amazing how many people actually undervalue themselves and will lowball it to stand out above another candidate so that they get the job instead of like just saying, I want $90,000. You know what I mean?
Well, I'll argue that, Natalie, because there's a lot of, the newer generation, they actually, their entitlement is through the roof. They want 100K coming out. And
I respect them for it, though, because, everything is very generational, and what we learned from our parents and all of that. So I think they're going about it the right way, and they ask about company culture and they care enough to know can I make my own schedule? Am I going to be a work dog? Do you expect me to be here 60 hours a week? Because they don't want those things, and they shouldn't, because we didn't, right? But
That's
we
right.
did anyways, and we all learned through burnout. And something I heard somebody say to me in another podcast a couple of days ago was, I think these young kids still have to pay their dues and work really hard. And I'm like, do they though? Like, are they smart enough to know and see the mistakes that we made? Like, do they have to go through burnout to find a life balance? Or can they just, get taught and understand this is how you avoid these pain points? You can still grow and learn and become a really successful person. I don't think that you have to struggle through the process. So stop making people do that.
Yes. That becomes a punishment, because they can avoid a lot of these, hurdles, and we can teach them and coach them to go through. That's what you're supposed to do as a leader. But again, when the salary aspect, the only thing I would state in that piece is, look, I think you should offer everybody market value, right?
Yeah.
There's an average market value out there. I always say, look, if you're asking for a lot coming in, show me that you've got that value, and I have no problem. If I think you're worth that much, I'd be willing to pay you for it. But if you show me zero value and your expectations up here, how can you justify that?
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I don't know if it's because I've had to negotiate working side by side CEOs for my entire career, but I had to get really used to being like, we need to implement this. This is how much it's going to cost, but this is how much it's going to save us long term. So I got really good at like negotiating terms of contracts and why we should be doing something. So what I used to do is say, I will accept your starting salary, but if I can hit X, Y, and Z within the first 6 months, this is what I want. So I would always automatically kind of like, this is great. That's a good starting conversation. But if I can do what I say I can do for you, this is where we want to go. And this is the time frame that I would like it in. And so you either knew you were working with the right company who is going to be able to have you grow and kind of evolve within that as a good leadership, or there is somebody who is like, no, this person's too much. They have too many ideas. They're going to rock the boat more than we want it rocked or we're comfortable with. So they, no, we don't think you're a good fit right now. And it's like, that's okay.
That's
On
right.
to the next one. Right. But I think it's just like kind of being able to meet people with where they're at, and then having the confidence to kind of like negotiate and say like, okay, well, let's put some KPIs in place. Right.
Yes.
And, I particularly, when I hire people, I want to retain really good people. So I always let them know, like, if you can show me, like, this is what I feel you're worth right now here today. But if you can show me X, Y, and Z, I'll bring you up past what we're asking right now or offering.
Yes.
So they always love that. And it keeps them so motivated and, ready to work and grow and like, okay, cool. Where can I go next? And what's the next thing I'm working towards? And they're so inspired and motivated through that it's just been a great experience.
That's right. Awesome. I want to kind of shift back to kind of leadership. And the question I had for you before, I know we're coming to the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, why are we differentiating men versus women in leadership?
Yeah. I feel like that is probably a limiting belief inside of a lot of people. Now, I would also argue it's a bit generational, where, women didn't work for a really long time. So I think a lot of these people came from a house where it was like, they didn't get that opportunity. They didn't get a chance to do that, or they felt that pain, like they couldn't vote or whatever. And so I think it's just a ripple effect of, kind of where we were at versus where we are today. I personally, as a woman, have never felt like my position has ever, like, I think I made more money than half of the men I know around, certain positions and stuff like that. So I've never personally felt that, but I also never had a belief that I was limited as a woman, right?
Nice.
So other women may not agree with what I have to say on that position, because some people feel really strongly about this. But I think that if you are somebody who's suffering from like a gender discrimination, you're probably in the wrong company. That's not a right fit for you and has core values or no core values whatsoever. And the other thing I would say is stop limiting yourself and stop putting yourself inside of a box that you don't want to be in. If you feel that you're worth more, speak up, right? Like nobody's stopping you from asking. So I don't necessarily see a division between that. And I think that everybody is like going to respect and want the best for their company. So at the end of the day, I know 95% of leaders who are good, successful, well-grounded leaders are not going to care who's doing the job as long as the job is being done and it's being done well, and they're a pleasure to be around, right? So I don't know. What do you think?
That's well, I believe it, but I also think there's still discrimination that happens. There's the unconscious bias that's very well alive and even today. And when you talk about DEI from these organizations, for a lot of them is just a ticky box to show from a perception perspective that we're following diversity and inclusion, but realistically, you're not putting the right people, like you said, in those roles where they will help you thrive. There's the right people. For me, when you say a leader is a leader is a leader, right? I don't see any difference. I've had fantastic female leaders that I've worked under, and they were leaders. I didn't look at them to say, "Oh, but she's a woman," right? You don't have that stuff going in your head. And now I'm trying to shift that also to, I work in an engineering field, so there's a lot of that segregation going on, and an engineer is an engineer is an engineer, like an accountant is an accountant. Stop segregating like men and women in their roles, right?
Right.
A good person is a good person, right?
I completely agree. And I think that, at the end of the day, if you are consciously like looking to diversify your company, it's probably because you've discriminated it in the past, right? Like I would never think about having to diversify any of the cultures or the communities that I've built or teams that I've led because they were the right person for the position, right? So I think when you're like consciously just focusing on the right things, that those factors don't really lie into it, right? Like even if you're a small team of like 10 people, if you aren't focused on what that person looks like or who they are or where they came from, and you're simply focused on attracting the right people into your company, I think that it's just like, again, are you here now or are you focused on other things, right? So for me, I think it's something that is kind of taught and trained from their previous employers, previous bosses. Maybe it's their parents who, didn't like a certain walk of life or something like that. But at the end of the day, we are all human and we all possess the exact same kind of passion and purpose. And we all were built with intention and put on this planet to kind of serve in a very unique way. And so it's not about who, how, what, or why. It's just like, is this person the right fit?
That's it. Yeah, absolutely. No, well said. So now I'm gonna go through the rapid fire question point of my podcast. So I'm gonna ask you some questions and just give me some quick answers. What is the most difficult emotion to control as a leader?
Fear. I don't know.
What is your unconventional definition of leadership?
Probably, I would say integrity, purpose, and passion.
Nice. Amazing. And what advice would you give young leaders?
To think of everybody the same way that you think of yourself, and to really know how much you wanted to succeed, how much advancement and growth, and like how you want to be valued, and treat every other person the exact same way that you want to be treated, and never ever think that you're better than anybody else, and that two heads are always better than one and three is better than two, and just treat people with the ability and give them space and room to be themselves and to grow.
Amazing. And where can they find Natalie?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can visit my website at natalienads.com, which is NATALIENADDZ.com.
Awesome. Well, I want to take this time again to thank you very much, Natalie, for your great insights and inspirational, content that you provided. And honestly, this was a fantastic podcast. I heard a lot of great things from you, and I learned a lot from you as well. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it was an honor to be here. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunity and the privilege to, serve and hopefully help some other leaders out there.
Absolutely. And thank you for all those who tuned in today to watch this podcast, and have a great day. And we'll see you in the next podcast. Take care, everyone.